Hey guys, today we're going to talk about water and chemical bonding. So let's do a quick review of some of the different interactions in bonding that you should have talked about in chemistry. The first type of bond is an ionic bond, and this is a bond that occurs between two oppositely charged atoms. So an example of this is sodium chloride. Sodium has a positive charge and chloride has a negative charge, so they're going to be attracted to one another. The second type of bonding is a covalent bond, which are really strong bonds, and this is when electrons are shared. Sometimes those electrons are shared evenly, and sometimes they're shared unevenly. So an example of a molecule that exhibits covalent bonding is water, which we're going to talk about in a few minutes. The third type of bond is hydrogen bonding, which are really weak bonds, which is really important in DNA, which we'll talk about later. And this is when a hydrogen atom is shared between two molecules. We can also see hydrogen bonding within or between water molecules. Hydrophobic interactions are the interactions between polar and nonpolar substances, and we're going to talk about what the difference is in just a minute. And the fifth type of interaction is what we call a van der Waals interaction, and this is between nonpolar substances. So what is the difference between polar and nonpolar molecules? Well, before we can answer that question, we first have to understand what electronegativity is. If you recall, electronegativity is the ability of one molecule's nucleus, or one atom's nucleus, to attract and pull on electrons. So if an atom exhibits a higher electronegativity than another, that molecule will be polar. In other words, the electrons will be shared unequally. If the electrons are shared equally and there's no difference in electronegativity between atoms, that molecule will be nonpolar. So within a water molecule, the oxygen has a higher electronegativity, which means it's going to pull on electrons more so than a hydrogen atom would. So water is an example of a polar covalent molecule. These hydrogen atoms that are attached to this oxygen are attracted to other oxygens and other water molecules. And those are where we find our hydrogen atoms. Here's an example of a couple different water molecules attracted to one another. So again, the oxygen of one is attracted to the hydrogen of another through a hydrogen bond. So it gives water this lattice structure. There are 5 main properties of water that make water a very unique liquid on life. The first is that it has a high specific heat. This means it takes a lot of energy to raise the temperature of water by 1 degree. So this means that we can have very stable environments within freshwater and marine ecosystems. The second characteristic is it has a heat of vaporization, and this is the characteristic that allows us to maintain homeostasis in humans. So an example of that is when we sweat, it takes a lot of energy or a lot of absorption of energy to allow evaporation to occur. So that means when you sweat, you actually cool your body down. The third example or characteristic of water is it's a universal solvent. This means that it can pretty much dissolve all substances. The fourth characteristic is that it has strong cohesion tension, and this allows for 3 very unique characteristics. The first is something we call transpirational pull. What that means is that as water is lost through leaves on different plants, other water molecules are going to move up to replace it. That's because water molecules are attracted to one another. There's a strong cohesion among water molecules. The second example is capillary action, and this is when water molecules will be attracted to an unlike substance. So water molecule attracted to a straw, or water molecule attracted to a stem. Those are some examples of that. And the third is that it has a high surface tension, which means it's going to take a lot of energy to break the tension between water molecules. This is why you can see some bugs walk across the surface of water. And the fifth example is ice is less dense. This is really important because ice will float, which means that during winter months, water ecosystems can maintain their populations Ice will also act as an insulator, so provide nutrients for an ongoing season.